Most people imagine wealth as freedom. Freedom from stress, freedom from limitation, freedom from fear. Money, in our collective imagination, is the great solver, the final unlock, the thing that turns life into something smooth, controlled, and finally safe. But there is a side of wealth that rarely gets spoken about. Not because it doesn't exist, but because the people experiencing it often feel they are not allowed to talk about it. Because complaining about money, when you have it, feels immoral, ungrateful, out of touch. So instead, the psychological cost of wealth stays hidden, quiet, internal, unexamined. And for many people who reach financial success, that cost arrives slowly, then all at once. This is not a story about money being bad. It's a story about what money changes inside the human mind. The first shift, when survival disappears. Before wealth, life has a clear structure. There are problems to solve, bills to pay, deadlines, pressure. That pressure is exhausting, but it also creates direction. When money removes survival anxiety, something unexpected happens. The mind loses its primary organizing force. For years, your thoughts revolved around necessity. What needs to be done today? What must be solved next? What cannot be avoided? Then suddenly, most of that disappears. You can afford to delay. You can afford to walk away. You can afford to say no. At first, this feels euphoric. Then disorienting, because the human brain is not built for infinite option space. It's built for constraints. When survival vanishes, purpose doesn't automatically replace it. Instead, a quiet question emerges. What am I supposed to do now? Not in a motivational way, but in an existential one. Without pressure, direction becomes optional. Without necessity, discipline weakens. Without stakes, decisions feel oddly hollow. And many wealthy people experience their first psychological fracture here, a strange emptiness that makes no logical sense. The loss of urgency. Urgency is painful, but it is also grounding. When something must be done, the mind locks in. Energy aligns. Focus sharpens. Wealth removes urgency. There is always tomorrow. Always another chance. Always a financial cushion. This changes how the brain evaluates effort. Why push today if nothing collapses tomorrow? Slowly, motivation becomes negotiable. Not because the person is lazy, but because urgency has been replaced by comfort. And comfort, psychologically, is neutral. It does not inspire action. It does not demand growth. It does not generate meaning. It only stabilizes. Over time, many wealthy individuals notice a decline in internal momentum. Not depression, not sadness, just inertia. Days blend together. Goals feel optional. Progress feels less necessary. The drive that once defined them starts to fade, not because they achieved everything, but because nothing forces them forward anymore. Achievement without fulfillment. Another psychological cost of wealth is discovering that achievement does not scale emotionally the way we expect. The first big win feels massive. The first financial breakthrough feels transformative. But each additional success delivers diminishing emotional returns. The mind adapts quickly. What once felt impossible becomes normal. What once felt extraordinary becomes baseline. And this creates a dangerous feedback loop. You assume the next level will finally feel different. More money, more status, more recognition. But the brain keeps normalizing it. Eventually, achievement becomes something you collect rather than experience. And when the emotional payoff disappears, a quiet confusion sets in. Why doesn't this feel better than it does? This question can be deeply unsettling, especially for people who built their identity around winning. Identity collapse. For many people, the pursuit of wealth becomes their identity. They are the builder, the grinder, the provider, the achiever. Their sense of self is tightly tied to forward motion. But once financial goals are met, the identity structure weakens. Because the role no longer has a clear function. You're no longer chasing survival. You're no longer proving capability. You're no longer climbing from below. So who are you now? This is one of the most destabilizing psychological costs of wealth. Not losing money, but losing definition. People often underestimate how much their suffering gave them structure. When that suffering disappears, the structure collapses, not all at once, but subtly. You stop relating to everyday stress. You stop sharing certain concerns. You stop worrying about things others worry about. And this creates a psychological distance. Friends complain about money problems you no longer have. Family conversations revolve around pressures you escaped. You listen, you empathize, but you are no longer inside the same reality. At the same time, people begin to treat you differently. Some admire you, some resent you, some expect things from you. Very few interact with you neutrally. This makes authenticity harder. You begin to wonder, do they like me, or what I represent? So you filter yourself. You downplay success. You avoid certain topics. Over time, this creates loneliness, not from lack of people, but from lack of resonance. The trust problem. Wealth introduces a new psychological burden, constant uncertainty about motives. When resources are abundant, attention follows. Business proposals, friendship offers, romantic interest, some genuine, some transactional. The brain begins to scan for hidden agendas. Is this connection real or strategic? Would they be here if the money disappeared? This hypervigilance erodes trust. Even authentic relationships can feel fragile. Because once doubt enters, safety leaves. And the mind begins to protect itself by emotionally distancing. Not because the person becomes cold, but because constant evaluation is exhausting. The pressure to maintain. Reaching wealth is one psychological challenge. Maintaining it is another. Once success is achieved, the fear shifts. It's no longer about failing to get there, it's about losing what you have. Lifestyle inflation raises the stakes. Public perception adds pressure. Identity ties deepen. The mind becomes risk-averse in new ways. Decisions feel heavier. Mistakes feel more dangerous. And instead of freedom, wealth sometimes produces a different form of anxiety. The anxiety of preservation. Meaning becomes abstract. When money solves practical problems, the mind searches for meaning elsewhere. But meaning is harder to quantify than income. There is no scoreboard, no clear progression, no obvious metric. So many wealthy individuals struggle with a vague dissatisfaction they can't articulate. They have comfort, but not clarity. Options, but not direction. And without meaning, comfort feels empty. Not painful, just hollow. This is where people often turn to extremes, overworking despite not needing to. Chasing novelty, overindulgence, constant stimulation, not because they are unhappy, but because silence reveals the emptiness. The guilt of having more. Another hidden cost is guilt. Not always conscious, not always verbalized, but present. Why do I have so much when others struggle? Did I deserve this, or just get lucky? What responsibility does this create? This guilt often manifests indirectly. Overgiving, overcompensating, self-sabotage, or complete avoidance of the topic altogether. Guilt complicates enjoyment. Even pleasure becomes layered with moral tension. The hedonic trap. The human nervous system adapts rapidly to pleasure. Wealth accelerates this adaptation. What once felt luxurious becomes expected. What once felt special becomes standard. This leads to a constant need for escalation. Better experiences, more exclusivity, higher intensity. But the baseline keeps rising. And the satisfaction never quite arrives. Not because wealth fails, but because the brain is designed to normalize advantage. When freedom feels directionless, true freedom requires internal structure. Without it, freedom becomes overwhelming. Too many choices, too little necessity, too much space. Wealth removes external constraints, but does not provide internal ones. So the mind must self-generate purpose. And that is far harder than people realize. Many never learn how. Why this cost is hidden. The psychological cost of wealth remains invisible for 3 reasons. First, social silence. Second, internal shame. Third, comparison. It feels wrong to struggle when you have everything. So the struggle goes underground. Untreated, unspoken, unresolved. The quiet truth. Wealth does not ruin people, but it reveals them. It amplifies internal structures, or exposes their absence. It removes external pressure, and demands internal clarity. Those who build meaning independent of money thrive. Those who don't often feel lost, despite having more than enough. The final reality. Money can buy comfort. It can buy safety. It can buy time. But it cannot automatically provide purpose, identity, connection, meaning. Those must be built deliberately. And the cost of not building them is one of the most hidden psychological prices wealth demands.